Hi everyone, today we're going to practice subdivision surface modeling and we're going to create a pipe clamp like this one. This is one of the versions I did. Our version will be slightly more complicated because we're going to add a hole here on the side of the pipe clamp, and this pipe clamp is based on an image that I found a long time ago on the internet. I don't remember where. So this was my inspiration for creating this pipe clamp. If you want to follow along, you can download a project file, and I've set up some reference images, front, top, and a side view. We probably won't be needing the side view, but I've put this in there just in case, you know. So let's get started. I'm going to use a tube and I'll change the orientation to -z. And we're only going to need a couple of rotation segments. Let's go for 8. And I'm hitting NH on the keyboard to switch to wireframe mode. We also need to rotate this a bit, like so. And we need to use an angle of 22.5 degrees here. So let's adjust the outer radius. I'm going to make it about this big, and the inner radius, let's do 200. I'll put this in a subdivision surface object just to check if it holds the shape and it stays the same size when I subdivide it. So this size is fine. I'm going to make this editable and optimize the object. And in polygon mode, I'm going to extrude this polygon down, and I'll extrude it down again, like so. And let's select the polygon at the front. Actually, before I do anything else, I'll go to model mode. And because we changed the orientation of the torus, we should probably reset the axis here. So with this polygon selected, let's extrude this forward to about here. And I'm also going to move the points back a bit, maybe like so. And next I'm going to create the hole that goes into the top of this surface here, and also the cutout here. And in the reference image I downloaded, this hole only has 4 sides, and 4 is not a good number to create a round shape. So I'm going to use at least 6. And 6 is good because we need to avoid bringing any more edges into this area here, because if we do, we're going to change this round shape and basically destroy it. And I'll use a cylinder here. Again, switching the viewport to wireframe mode. I'm also using snapping. And I have vertex snap, edge snap, and polygon snap activated here, as well as midpoint snap. So I've just snapped this to the center of this polygon on the top surface here. Let's scale this down a little bit. And we're only going to use 6 segments, like I said. And let's move this down. And I'll just use a bool object here to cut that hole in there. And in order to get a better result, I'm going to select our, let's rename this the pipe clamp. Clamp, there we go. So I'm going to ring select these edges and just use connect points edges. You can find that if you right click and select it from the menu here. You can also hit Shift C to bring up the commander, connect edges. And you can see just by adding this additional edge, we're getting exactly the geometry that we want. So I'm going to make this editable. Before I do, I should change some of the settings in the bool object. Let's create a single object. We don't need to hide the new edges because the geometry that is created is exactly the geometry that we need. So I'm going to make this editable. Let's just get rid of the selection tag. We could also get rid of the UVW tag, because as soon as you change the geometry and the original object was a torus, this UVW tag is basically useless. So next we're going to create the cutout at the bottom, and for this I'm using a cylinder again. And I'll snap it down to the bottom edge. Scale it up a bit to about here. In the reference image, this round area is not very pretty. So in this tutorial, we're going to do this a little bit better and create a nice and round shape here. And for the cylinder, I'm going to use 8 rotation segments, and we have to change the rotation again, 22.5 degrees. And we need to make this bigger. And I'm using a bool object again. And let's see, we could keep these edges if we wanted to. Actually, I think I'm going to do that. In the previous version, the topology was a little bit different, but I think this is actually going to work. Let's create a single object and make this editable again. And we have these 2 triangles here. We can get rid of these by connecting these 2 edges, and then I'm just going to select this one and scale it down. So that should work. And because I didn't hide the new edges, the bool object also created these edges here. I'm just going to select them and dissolve them. And then I'll just use the knife tool and make cuts straight across. Before I do though, I'm going to switch on visible only. And let's make some more cuts to get rid of the n-gons here. And it's looking fine, but we could line up these edges. So what I'll do is I'll just select one of these, and it's at minus 140 on the z-axis. So I'm just going to select all of these. And put these to minus 140 and change the size to 0. And here I'm going to select this edge, and it's at minus 50. I'll just double click on one of these edges and I'll put these to minus 50 and change the size to 0. And next I want to create these areas here. And because the object is symmetrical, I'll delete half of it. And you can see here at the back we also have these 2 triangles. I'll just connect these edges and then just scale this edge down. And I'll just select these points in the front view and just scale them down to 0. And maybe let's select these points and just scale them down a little bit more to about here. In edge mode, I'm going to ring select these edges here and the ones up there. Use connect points edges to create edges at the center. And now we can delete half of the object. we can extrude this polygon over a little bit. And I think I'll just move it to about here. And because we're also going to do these holes, we need additional edges. So I'm going to ring select these edges here and just connect them. I'll just move these edges back a little bit. If I subdivide this, you can see we're getting pretty much the shape that we want. I guess we could move these back a little bit further. And maybe move this point out a little bit further. So something like this. And I'm going to scale these down to about here. And let's select these points here and also scale them. It's a bit tricky, so I'll try to line these up with the other edges best I can, because otherwise we would get a non-planar polygon or several non-planar polygons. We don't want that. And I guess we could also scale these down a little bit to get something like this. We also need some edges here at the center, so connect these edges here, and I'll just bevel these ones to about here. And holding down Shift, I'll left click on polygons, and this will turn the edge selection into a polygon selection, and we can delete those. And I'm going to use close polygon hole to close these two polygon holes. Select the two polygons, and I'll just remove the n-gons, which gives us a triangle here at the front. And I'm going to get rid of that by adding an edge loop here. And we also need to select the edges down here. And these ones. So I'll connect these edges. And then I'll just select these 2 points here and move them back a little bit. And the reason I'm doing that is because right now we do have a quad, but 3 of the points of this quad are exactly on the same edge. They form a straight line. And for subdivision surfaces, that's not a good quad. In this case, it wouldn't really matter because it's a flat surface, but I'll turn this into this diamond-shaped polygon. Now something here doesn't look quite right. Let's see. Somehow I created additional edges here. I'll just select these and dissolve them. So you can see we have 10 polys. If I go to my special selection plugin and deselect all and then select all quads, you can see we have 92 quads. So that means we have a couple of triangles. I'll use the polygon pen to add these 2 polygons, and I'll just dissolve these 2 edges. So now we should have all quads. So let's have a look. I think we have everything that we need except for the holes up here, but I'm going to add the control edges to this object before I add these holes. And just in case, I'll keep a backup of this. Backup, I'll just make this invisible. And let's delete the tags. So in edge mode, I'm going to do a func break selection and select all the edges. And we need to deselect a number of these edges. We don't want to bevel these ones, for example, because we need to keep this round. And the same over here, we don't want these edges, so I'm going to deselect them. We don't want these ones either. And let's see, down here, we definitely want to deselect all of these ones. And all of these ones. And these ones. So I think that's looking good. And I think I'm also going to select these ones before I bevel. And we need to continue selecting all the edges down here. And I've just saved this selection. I have a shortcut for that, so I'm saving this edge selection. You can also go to select, set selection to do that. My shortcut for that is tab 2. So let's bring up the bevel tool, and I'm going to do a solid bevel here. Let's use an offset of 6 maybe, and that's looking good. I have the mithering set to uniform here. If I set it to default, we get something like this, and I think it's just more work to clean this up. So I'll use uniform. We still have to make some changes down here. And let's hide this object. So using the knife tool, I'll make a couple of cuts here. And I'll just switch off the reference image. So I'll make a cut here, and here, and here, and here. And we also need one here. And I'll just continue this one, and this one. And let's just dissolve all of these edges here. And I'll just weld these points. And we need to add a couple more cuts over here. Like so. I'll just move this point down a little bit, and I'll get rid of all of these edges here. And I'm going to move this one down a little bit as well. So we can dissolve these edges, and let's see, these ones. And here at the front, we also need to add a few cuts. And dissolve a couple of edges. And over here the bevel is not very even, so I think I'll change that. Let's go to the front view. And select these points. So I'm selecting the one at the front and at the back. And let's just move this down and over a little bit. And I'll just move these ones up a little bit. It's not perfectly even, but it should be fine. So let's see how that looks when we subdivide it. It looks okay. If you wanted to, you could change the geometry. For example, we could do a cut like this, and in the front view let's see, we need to cut from this point here. So I'll just make a cut like this, and then I'll cut again from this point over to here. And we have two edges here. So I'm changing the flow of the geometry a little bit. And we could also make cuts here. And that means we can get rid of these edges here. If I subdivide this, the geometry just looks a little bit nicer. It does create more polygons though. So that is the drawback of doing it like this. And let's see what we can do back here. You would also need to dissolve these edges. And I'll just select these 2 points and weld them to this one. Let's get rid of this additional edge here. And maybe we could just weld these points here and then dissolve these edges. Let's have a look. Let's deselect this one, dissolve these edges, weld these points, and dissolve these edges. We do need this one though. Because I do want this to be 100% quads. So right now we have 309 polygons. Let me just check if it's all quads. Oh, we seem to have one triangle in there. And that's the one up here. And in order to get rid of that, I'll just make a cut over here, and a cut over here. And let's dissolve this edge and this one. And down here I'm just going to connect these 2 points. So that's all quads again, which is good. Let's subdivide this, and that's already looking pretty nice. So I'll make another backup copy, and you know what, I'll just put these in a null object and call it backup and hide it. So next we're going to add the hole in this area here, and I'll just use another cylinder for that. Move it over and snap it to this edge here. Let's scale this down to about here. Maybe let's move it forward and make sure to snap it to this edge here, and let's make it a little bit bigger. And for this one I'm also going to use only 6 segments, and I'll change the height. And I think I'm going to move this forward a little bit more. The reason being that I want this curve to be nice and smooth. And the problem is we don't want more edges close to this edge, because that's going to create a sharper corner. And I want to keep this a smooth and flowing curve like this. So I'm going to move this cylinder forward a little bit more. We don't need to worry about doing it exactly as it is in the reference image. The point is to create a nice looking object, and hopefully one that will even look better than the previous version that I did. So I think that's okay. Well, that should be okay, hopefully. Let's put these in a bool object, and I'm going to create a single object again, and this time I'm going to hide the edges. I think before I make this editable, we could try and add additional geometry to the pipe clamp. Let's try and do that. We need 2 more edges, one here and one here. And I'll use the plane cut tool, and I'm going to snap it to this point of the cylinder and make a cut, and I'm going to make another cut here. So if we uncheck hide new edges, we're still getting a bit of a mess, but I think that should be easy enough to clean up. But just in case, I'm going to create another backup object, and let's make this bool object editable. I'll optimize, which didn't do anything. And before I add the control edges for these holes, I'm going to clean up the mesh. And I'll select one of these polygons here, select the connected polygons, and then I'm going to hide the unselected polygons so we can focus on this part and fix that before we move on to the bottom part. So over here we just need to delete a point, and here we can connect these points. And these ones, and down here I'll weld these points. And let's see, I'm going to deselect everything and select the n-gons. And we don't have any up here anymore. And we don't have any triangles either, so that's good. And what I'll also do is I'll select these edges here. And I will use a script from the HB modeling bundle that I'm using in almost all of my tutorials, which is called HB even distribution, and I have it mapped to a shortcut. Let's go back to polygon mode. I'm going to unhide everything and then select one of the polygons down here, and again select the connected and hide the unselected polygons. And let's go ahead and clean this one up. So here I'm going to connect these points, I'm going to weld these ones. And down here I'll connect these ones and get rid of this one. Let's just check for triangles. So it's all quads, that's good. And I'm also going to even out the geometry down here. Let's select these edges here, go to polygon mode. I'm going to unhide everything, back to edge mode, and I'm also going to select these edges on the top hole. And I'm going to do a solid bevel. 6 is probably a bit much. I'll go for maybe 4. And that's not looking so good. Let's go back a step, and what I'll do is I'll just dissolve these edges for now. I don't think we need to worry about these ones down here. And I'm also going to dissolve these ones. Let's try that bevel again. I'll just test it on one of these holes and see how that works. And you can see we're getting a much more even bevel here. So I'll just reconnect the points. Same over here. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here. Just select these edges, do a solid bevel, and then just reconnect the geometry. Like so. Okay, that's basically looking fine, but there's a couple of things I want to tweak a bit. Let's go to front view. I'm hitting NI to switch to isoparm mode. And one of the things I don't like is this curve up here. We're getting this crease. And in order to get rid of that, let's just have a look at the perspective view here. Let's just try and move these points and see what happens. I do believe we need to move these ones a little bit as well. Yeah. Let's go ahead and move these ones down a bit further. And that is giving us a nicer curve up here. Let's select these points, just check the perspective view. Maybe we could move these over a little bit and then down. I'll just try moving these ones around until I get something that is a little bit smoother. You just need to be careful. Because we are changing that hole a little bit. Let's undo that. What if I just move these over a little bit, something like this. So that is looking a little bit smoother. Let's just check the perspective view. I'll just slide this point back. Okay, and that is looking a little bit better. So we got this area fixed. Let's go to the top view, switching to isoparms again. And I also want to change the shape a little bit. So let's see what we can do. I'll just move these points around a little bit. Trying to smooth out that curve here. And maybe we could move these ones forward a little bit. And again, we need to be careful because we don't want to screw up shapes in other areas of the model. And I think that's looking good. So let's do the same thing over here. I'll just move some of these points around a little bit. And I'm eyeballing this. Theoretically, we could delete part of the geometry and use the part that we've already changed to get the other half of this part of the model, but I'm not going to do that. So let's see. I'll just move these points to the same position. And that should look fine. So everything's nice and smooth. We don't have any dents in there. And that's good. The next thing I want to change is this curve here. You can see we're getting a little bit of a line, and that's because these edges are a little too close together. If I switch that off. So it's not really going to be super smooth. But what we can do here to change that is we can simply select these points and drag them up like so, and that will give us a much nicer transition here. So I think that's looking good. And there is one more thing we need to change, which is this entire area here basically. And the reason for that is because we needed the control edges to make these edges down here sharper. Unfortunately, that's also going to change the round shape here a little bit. Now before I change that, I'm going to put this in a symmetry object and make this editable. And I'll just dissolve these edges and put this in our subdivision surface object. I'll just delete those tags again. So now you can see this a little bit better. We're not getting a nice circular shape here, right? So we need to change that. And in order to change that, I'm going to use a helper object. Let's add a cylinder. I'll put this to -z and just scale it up to about here. And we could switch off the reference image so we can see things a little bit better. And then I'm just going to select the points here and I'll drag these down, and we can move these ones over. And up here I'm going to move these ones up a little bit and over like so. So now if I render this, I'm getting a much more circular shape. And we could eyeball this and do the same thing over here, or you could use a symmetry object. I think I'll just use a symmetry object. So go to edge mode, ring select these edges, connect them, and just delete this half. And let's use a symmetry object, make it editable. And delete the edges, or dissolve the edges at the center again. And we need to bring the subdivision editor up to 3 to make this look nice and smooth. We do have a similar problem down here, as you can see. So let's just reuse this cylinder here. I'll just move it down to the bottom like this, and then just scale it down to, let's see, about here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And then again, select the points and just move them up a little bit. And I'll move these over a little bit. Move these ones over a little bit further to get a nice and round shape. Now unfortunately I didn't think of that before, so now I need to ring select these edges again and connect them. Delete half the object again. Put it in a symmetry object. Make the symmetry editable. And just ring select these edges and dissolve them. And that's looking pretty good. So this is our finished pipe clamp. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you again soon.